critical inquiry by members of Parliament through basically the Defence Select Committee have concluded that the British Armed Forces are increasingly overstretched. Now, I think we all had a sense that was the case, but they start to produce the evidence for it, and they say they are not adequately prepared for a potential war with Russia. Indeed, I think they're saying we could probably fight for about 2 weeks on a typical ground war. Basically, they've done the Select Committee's done a year-long review, and it highlights these sort of challenges, asserting, and this is the key bit, warfighting or strategic readiness cannot be achieved without immediate reforms, and the reforms are seen imperative to address a recruitment crisis, because you've got more people leaving than joining, and on top of that, the stockpile of weapons and ammunition in Britain is like disappearing. Well, that's my suspicion. That is what is implied by the report. Let's get an expert, however, to talk us through this. I'm very pleased to welcome Simon Diggins, OBE, Defence Security and Military Analysis. Simon, hello.
Nick, good afternoon to you.
Well, thanks for joining us. I mean, the Defence Select Committee report, I haven't pored over it. I suspect you've had a good gander through it. I mean, is that the assessment, that we basically are far too stretched? We'd probably struggle in more of what I suppose people would call more of a conventional battle against someone like Russia, but actually we can't even maintain the level of forces we've got, which I think are around about 74,000 in the army at the moment, because more people are leaving than recruiting.
Yeah, I think the report is very detailed. It's very thorough, and it's very sensible in its conclusions. It's nothing rushed about this, whatever. They've taken a year, but this problem's been building now. You can say, when did it start? Yeah, for at least 20 years, I would say. We've had a situation whereby defence has always had to take back pocket to whatever else is going on, and maybe that's fair. You know, we've had other things we need to get on with, but certainly I would say since 2010 onwards, there's been a gradual decline in the size of our armed forces. We've had 3 major reviews since then, all of which said something must be done, and now we've really reached the kind of nadir. We've reached rock bottom, where our ability to do what we need to do, which is defend our country, is now in serious question. And the report has done it.
Sorry, General Dannett, there's a bit of a delay on the line, so apologies if it sounded like I was cutting you off. But you raised a point. General Dannett, a retired general, head of the army, he was basically saying, we've kind of done a 1930s here. In the run up to the war in the 1930s, we were basically cutting back, and then there was this huge panic, and we all know the consequences. We got there in the end, but we were seriously under-resourced. Do you feel it's that bad?
I think, and I fear it is exactly that situation. And it's worth noting that what strong defence gives you is not only the ability to react to crises that occur in the world, it's also their basis as deterrence. Because if you show weakness, or if you're seen to be weak, or if you are actually weak, then your opponents are going to seek to take advantage of you. And that's the situation we're in now. And that was the situation we were in the 1930s. I agree with what Lord Dannett said. And of course, Lord Dannett has not only his huge experience head of the armed forces, but he also studied that period. He's very recently written a book about the decline of the British armed forces between the First World War and the Second World War. You know, why was it an army that won in 1918 actually basically found itself defeated tactically, operationally, strategically in 1940 over a 20-year period? So when he says that we are now in that situation, I think he should be listened to. Because that's exactly where we are. We cannot deploy even a single armoured division into the field. We can't get our aircraft carrier into the Gulf because we haven't got a Royal Fleet Auxiliary with enough personnel on board to keep it in place. That's the situation we've got ourselves into. So we can't even deal with current crises, let alone what we might anticipate against Russia.
Is it a question that how the pie of money has been cut up? Because let me just put this to you. We've been one of the few countries that's actually met essentially the NATO recommendation of 2% of GDP. We've been above that in some cases. I think there were only 2 years in the last 15 when we fell below. So in that sense, money's been on the table. But strategic review after strategic review has kind of said you probably won't face a land war. You'll probably need investment in, and this is where my lack of skill will show, cybersecurity or all these other things. If you like, has there been a combination of misreading what the future landscape battlefield will be, and therefore perhaps spending the money where we shouldn't have spent it? Or is it a case we needed to spend that, but we now need to spend more because we're facing the battlefield scenario?
I think I'm going to be awful and say we actually need both, because what the emphasis on things like cyber warfare, information warfare, electronic warfare, and all those kind of aspects mean is that's where technology is going. So we need to be able to match the opponents in that. But that does not mean, and this is where we've made the mistake, the strategic mistake. It does not mean that we don't need all the other things that go with it as well. And there is something that it goes back to Lenin. Lenin said, famous quotation from Lenin, he says, quantity has a quality of all of its own. And what the Ukraine war has actually shown to us is you need the personnel, you need the resources, and you need lots of them in order to fight a peer-on-peer interstate conventional warfare. And we haven't got them. We have allowed that aspect to disappear. The other side of it, the other reason why I think our procurement is so out of tilt is actually a lot of our money we have been spending, as you say, we have been spending over the 2% recommended by NATO, has gone into our strategic nuclear deterrent. Now, that's a whole big argument about that. But that is taking up a very large percentage of the procurement money that is going forward into the future. We need a strategic deterrent, we need something like that, but basically it's distorting where our money is going as well. And what we've ended up with is what you might call a shop window armed forces, where we have a few very good, excellent bits of equipment with some very good, very well-trained personnel, and we should be really proud of our armed forces. But we have no depth, we have no resilience behind them. And I think that's where we've gone wrong, and that's what we need to try and find. And to do that properly, we are going to have to reform our recruiting and retention and also our defence procurement, because that is also not working very well for us.
But Simon, is there an appetite amongst the generations now who would be potentially joining the army? I declare an interest. My son is in the army. But is there an appetite to actually go and serve your country? I mean, there's nothing to add to that question, really. What do you think?
I think the answer is yes. But I think quite reasonably, all those people who might come and join the army, and I really hope we get everybody in who wants to join the armed forces, are obviously and realistically looking at themselves and looking at the state of the armed forces and said, is this a place where I've got a full career? Will I have the resources I need to fight the battles I need? Or am I going to find myself, when it comes down to it, not having the resources, but still expected to go out and fight without the resources in place? So I think it's one of these things where do you start to put this thing right? There's an issue around, as you say, what are we doing as an armed forces, where the money is, and then also other kind of, you might call them more mundane issues, but they're not mundane to the people involved, around pay, around accommodation, and then also really, we have to sort out our dreadful recruitment system, because that is not working in our favour.
No, you've outsourced it, and it's a nightmare, isn't it, now?
Yeah.
It's basically been outsourced. Can I ask you a bit about accommodation and if you like, the rubbish pay and so forth? There was a time when the first in line for a pay rise would have been our armed forces. It was the first thing Margaret Thatcher did in 1979, I think, when she came into office. And they've fallen far behind. I mean, these days, youngsters can go online and basically see everything that is wrong, not necessarily everything that is right. And the pay is not going to compete, if they wish to work, with what you can get in the sector. Someone's tweeted in, I'll give you an example. I think one of the reasons people are leaving the armed forces is the fact that if you learn a trade in the military, you can then go and get paid twice as much in Civvy Street for that trade. Yeah.
So we have to do something about that. We have to ensure that those who've got the technical skills we need and we want, and we must ensure that everybody who wants to come can do that, will be properly rewarded. What happened in 2010 as a result of austerity was the government broke the contract between the armed forces and its personnel. I was still serving the armed forces at that time. When Margaret Thatcher brought in the new pay structure in 1979, what she also did was establish something called the Armed Forces Pay Review Body. Now, what that did was it independently set out what the pay should be for the armed forces. Now, we used to grumble about it because you never get quite what you want, but fundamentally, the government always paid up. In 2010, the beginning of austerity, that stopped. And it didn't stop for 1 year, it stopped for 3 years. But it also broke that contract whereby the armed forces could expect that they would be reasonably remunerated and that their pay would be set by an independent body. And we've never got back that sense of trust, and never got back that sense of that we will get what we deserve to have, not more than we need to have. I always recognise that any penny you do spend on defence could also be spent elsewhere. So, I think we're responsible people. We actually understand, if you like, the opportunity costs of defence. We got all that bit, but what we also expect is that we are paid properly and we are remunerated properly, and you don't break that social contract.
I must say, I think it's quite fascinating, Simon, that we're heading towards an election, and it's quite possible defence might actually be a subject in the election. I'm sure you'd like to see that.